my guest is still Mr. Joe Jackson. He's an economist as well as the Chief Executive Officer for Daylex Finance. We've been talking about tax reliefs as well as charting the path towards economic recovery. Mr. Joe, I've been having a very interesting conversation with you. I just want to zoom in quickly to imports. I mean, there's always been that argument that we like to import too much. How do we reduce our import dependency? What's your take on this?
Well, some years ago, I was singing from the same hymn book. We import too much. And that's why the cedi is continuously depreciating. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you sit, I've changed my tune. I'm singing from a different hymn book.
Why is that?
It's very simple. When you take the sum, the value of our exports consistently, year on year, for as long as you can look back, maybe go back to 2016 and 2017, the value of our exports is considerably higher than the value of our imports. And when I say considerably higher, not by, it's been as, in 2022, it was over $2 billion higher. So obviously, it's not a simple matter of export versus import. Because if it was a simple matter of export versus imports, then Ghana should be in a good space. Our cedi should be appreciating. And we should be a net lender to other countries. Unfortunately, you know what happens? When we export $100 worth of whatever you like, gold or petroleum, what comes back is so little that by the time we accumulate another $100 to go ahead and buy fuel or whatever we need, you have to export a lot. Take, for example, Botswana. They don't have oil. So non-oil exports, when they export $100, $51 also comes back. Hop over to Nigeria. When they export $100 of oil, another $51 come back.
So there's a retention.
Ghana, when we export $100 of oil, 17.6%, barely $18 come back.
And we actually do have oil.
When we export gold, and gold is there, right? When we export gold, guess what? What comes back is barely 8%. So if you take gold and I export $100 of gold, I only get $8 back. So I have to export 100, 200, 300, $1,200 before that 8% will start to add up to $100 for me to go and buy $100 worth of drugs or clothing or food items, or whatever I need. So the issue to this problem is that when we export, we should keep more of it. In fact, the reason why cocoa has been a mainstay of this economy is, guess what? Cocoa is the only thing that when we export, a huge amount is retained because it is exported by only the government.
Do you think we should be changing that regime in terms of how the cocoa is exported? Because it doesn't fall back on the farmers as well in terms of their pricing as well.
Oh, it's first of all, let me take a little minute to finish off this argument. So the argument is simple. If you want to have more, the cedi remain stable, start keeping more of what you export. How do you do that? Number one, there's local content laws, enforce them. Nobody should buy water from a neighboring country when they are mining for for gold or oil in Ghana. As simple as that.
It's counterproductive.
And the rules are there. Obey them. 2, you shouldn't be selling in dollars and paying me my taxes and my royalties in cedis. Me to pay me in dollars some. It's a simple rule.
Yeah.
So maybe we should be looking to government, parliament, and say, Parliament, change the rules. Let them pay us.
Yeah.
You know, certainly, let's entrench the issue of buying gold, using gold for reserves, because that gives us a higher retention than if we sold the gold and only $6 came, and the $6 is what is going to contribute to reserves. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
If we sold $100, only $8 will come back in terms of gold, and then all that $8 starts to contribute to our reserves. If you buy it in cedis, the bulk of it, even if some leaks out, will be there for reserves. That's why we've been able to improve our reserve position by this Gold for Reserves program over the last year.
And that has even helped to even show up the city as well, particularly in the last few months of 2024.
So that is what was used to show up, albeit some say artificially, but we've been able to do it. So it's simple, right? Let's not talk about not exporting enough. In fact, if we're retaining, in this time of hunger, we could even be importing more food for the Ghanaians that are suffering. So put that one aside. Now, COCOBOD was interesting because COCOBOD was one institution that was not under the Ministry of Agric. It was under Ministry of Finance. Because it was the Ministry of Finance that understood the strategic significance of COCOBOD in terms of what the role it played in keeping the value of the cedi, because retention of our exports was so high. In the last 8 years, we took COCOBOD and gave it back to Ministry of Agric. And the net result is now that COCOBOD is forecasting 30% less 30% of harvest than what they used to do then.
Yeah, they even had to delay I think the 2022-2023 crop season or so. They had to delay some of the exports.
You haven't even heard the West. 2 months ago, they actually issued a bulletin that even the 30% that they were talking about is going to be even less.
Yeah, they revised that figure again. And so, that actually impacts on the city because we have a lot of cocoa farmers who also rely on this export commodity.
Listen, cocoa is an important strategic sector in this company. It's not just because it employs people, but because we export cocoa and because cocoa plays such a significant role in the retention process. In fact, when you hear people talk about let's add value, all they are saying is that when we add value, we retain more. That's what it means. When somebody says add value to your exports, he's saying that when you add value,
you keep more.
You keep more of the retention.
Yeah.
For starters, maybe we should hand cocoa back to Ministry of Finance. And COCOBOD needs
a revamp.
This is not just a reset.
Yeah.
It needs, when you are an adult and they say you have a root canal and they have to, this one you have to hold the food, the tooth and pull it out painfully. So we had our Honorable Dr.
Randy Abbey. Randy Abbey.
Is it?
Yeah, Dr. Randy Abbey.
Dr. Randy Abbey has been appointed to
COCOBOD.
COCOBOD, yes, Randy Abbey. I wish him well, and I hope he will do the tooth pulling that is required, and maybe pull the tooth without anesthesia. Because
it's a very huge task for him.
It's a huge task.
Yeah.
Cocoa is important. Cocoa is so strategic. Cocoa is one of the ways in which we will hold the value of the city. So let's look at cocoa, and maybe he should be reporting to the Ministry of Finance rather than to the Ministry of Agric, because that whole 8-year experiment in reporting to the Ministry of Agric did not work.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. So I just want us to just talk very briefly on the cedi. We currently have the cedi at 16 cedis to $1. There are projections that it could actually go up further because we are beginning to see the true picture of what some analysts say was a massaging of the cedi a few months down to the election. How do you think we can, address this depreciation that we are experiencing right now, particularly so that we can be appreciating the local currency, because it affects literally everything. The moment the cedi goes up against the dollar, we see everything in this country go up. Electricity prices, every little thing goes up. How do you think we can address this issue?
Well, for one, we've discussed this. Gold for reserves. Gold for reserves, because that allows us to retain a larger portion of the export, and that retention helps the value of the cedi. So gold for reserves, and by extension gold for oil and all the other gold programs that were being held. I've said in other platforms that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bath water, and that gold for reserves, because of its potential to increase the amount of local retention we have, is a very important plank in the pillar in the effort to keep the cedi stable. Right. The other thing is that we should tackle inflation head on, food inflation head on, and it's the two parts of the same coin. If we allow inflation to run away with us, the cedi will depreciate. If we bring down inflation, the cedi will have a beneficial effect on the cedi. Likewise, if we work on the cedi, it will have a beneficial effect on inflation. So working on the cedi and inflation side by side will go into a virtuous circle, a virtuous loop where literally the inflation hand washes the cedi value hand, and the cedi value hand washes the inflation hand.
And that also impacts on the interest rates as well, which is the monetary policy as well.
The interest rates. Now, one of the things we have to do is that we have to drive down local interest rates. Now, some analysts say, let's allow inflation and the market to decide what the interest rates are, and maybe and let's look at this indicative T-bill rate of 30%. I have a slightly different opinion. We are in a crisis. We're in a crisis. The large institutions that buy the T-bills are not that many. The real, what I will call the market makers in the T-bill sector are not that many. Bring them to a round table. Sit them around the table and say, listen, to get out of this crisis, we need at least a 90-day moratorium. In those 90 days,
we bring the rates down.
Let's bring the rates down. It may be artificial, but work with us to bring the rates down. And after 90 days, other things we are doing will start to kick in. And we will all, as a nation,
begin to feel the effects of it.
But if we start arguing that inflation is this high and rates should be this high, then we are feeding that negative spiral that keeps going. Inflation is high, so interest rates are high. Interest rates are high, so inflation has to be high. Then it also feeds into the same forex, and we seem almost powerless to deal with all these multifaceted issues that we have.
And that also sends a bad message to investors as well, because when the numbers are not making sense, like monetary policy 27%, inflation 23%, it's like it's not tied together.
Will not make sense. So I say this is an opportunity. Is it a 90-day moratorium or a 120-day moratorium? Let's do a 90-day, because the pressure is on the 91-day bills. Let's drive the rate down. Let's drive the rate down and keep it down for that period, and say, after that period, if you haven't been able to achieve any effect, maybe all gloves are off. But that's one of the things we should do.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. So I just want us to talk just briefly on climate financing. I know climate change is something that we are in it currently. We're experiencing climate change. Do you think there should be some allocations, to ensure that we're able to tackle climate change?
You see, because we are so broke, and because there is quite a significant amount of money outside there that will help fund issues to do with climate change, we should tap into it. It should be one of the resources that we are going to tap into to help us get out of the bind we are in. And just maybe, if we can't get access to international regular markets, maybe there are some small climate change markets that we can tap into for various products to help the challenges we face. So, being real, one, that climate change is real and is happening and is closer than we think.
Yeah.
And two, by reading that sentiment and the money that is outside, it seems to me a no-brainer that we should be looking aggressively as to how to tap into those markets and help relieve the challenges we face today.
So would you say same for SME financing? Because we tend to see SMEs play a very important role in our economy. But they don't tend to have a lot of financing arrangements to propel their businesses.
Let me tell you one of the opinions that I hold. The problem to SME finance, it's not really access, it's cost. And for so long as, listen, the policy rate is what, 27%?
27%, yeah.
So what is the SME supposed to borrow at?
Yeah.
So, and truly, if you get somebody lending to you at 36, the person is kind. 40, okay. About 40 before we can start talking. So really, if you want to, again, back on the issue of interest rates, the elephant in the room when SME rates are spoken about is the fact that the government is taking away, swallowing so much money that where is the SME going to get any money at a decent rate?
Yeah.
Listen, it's not as if we have an unlimited amount of money in this economy. If the government goes and always takes even more than it set out to do, because it's week on week borrowing even more than it set out to do at rates that are so high, forgive me, give every SME access to finance, and they wouldn't or they shouldn't, because the rate is too high. Get the rate down, then we can start to look at, do they really have access or not? At the moment, it doesn't matter whether you have access or not. Should you even be borrowing at this rate? That's the question we have to ask.
Great. So the new government has taken over, I think, about 3 weeks now. They are barely in a month. From your POV, what top 3 advices would you give to the current government?
First of all, there's so many advices. I wonder whether that
3 will be enough.
and there's so many issues that are facing us that really I don't know whether 3 is enough. But top of my agenda is food. Tackle food inflation. That's really top of my agenda. Tackle food inflation and tackle the twin issues of interest rates, which also drives the cedi's value. So for me, those 3 are related. And let's tackle the issue of food aggressively. Let's tackle the issue of preserving the value of the cedi, possibly by another aggressive gold for reserves program, but implemented much better than it has been in times past. And then let's look at bringing the market makers together putting and asking for an artificial reduction in exchange interest rates so that we can have time to have our the different policy initiatives kick in. So those are my priority areas: food, the exchange rate, the inflation rate, and I think that they are all very interlinked. So it makes sense to keep them as your three priorities.
My very final question, I can't leave you without asking you this question. Is Ghana still broke?
Ghana is broker than ever, but there's hope.
There's hope. Yeah, there you have it. I've been speaking with Mr. Joe Jackson. He's an economist as well as the Chief Executive Officer for Daylex Finance. He's been my guest on this week's edition of BizTech. We've been talking about tax reliefs as well as charting the path towards economic recovery. Before we go, don't forget to log on to our website, www.ghanaweb.com. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, as well as X, @the GhanaWeb. I am Maoli Aholimega. Many thanks for watching.